Hey everyone. Today we're going to step inside silk curtains and sharpen politics to meet the woman who transformed the Ottoman Empire without ever holding a sword. She ruled from a tent, whispered through letters, and changed the course of one of the world's greatest dynasties. This is the story of Roxelana, also known as Hürrem Sultan, the concubine who became queen and the queen who became a shadow emperor. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. And as always, wherever you are in the world, whatever time it is right now, good morning, good afternoon, or good night. Now let's listen to the compelling story in this video of mine. You shuffle along the dusty road, wrists bound, shoulders aching, your eyes searching the horizon beyond the Black Sea. It smells of sweat, leather, and the stink of defeat. You are one of dozens of Ruthenian captives, herded like animals toward a city you've never seen, to serve a man whose name you only now begin to hear in whispers, Suleiman. They call you Alexandra, but that name is already burning away in the Ottoman sun. It won't last long. Soon, you'll be Roxelana, the woman from Ruthenia, and soon after that, you'll be Hürrem, the laughing one. But right now, your future smells like fear and foreign spices. The slave market of Istanbul is loud with shouting men and crying girls. Perfumed bidders flick silver coins and inspect teeth as if choosing fruit. But you're clever. Clever enough not to fight your captors. Clever enough to lower your eyes and cry only when no one's looking. You learn fast. You watch. You survive. Soon you're sold to the palace harem, and that's when the game changes. You're scrubbed in rosewater, dressed in silks, and trained like a performer. The harem isn't a prison, it's a chessboard. Every woman is a pawn or a queen, and you're determined not to stay a pawn for long. The elder concubines teach you language, music, the Quran, and most importantly, how to charm. And every night, while others sleep or sob, you rehearse your smile in the polished bronze mirror, sharpening your eyes like weapons. The other girls in the harem talk about Suleiman in tones of awe. He's no longer just a prince, he's the new sultan. The conqueror's grandson, a poet, a warrior, a builder. And as fate would have it, he's just ascended to the throne in 1520. When you first see him, it's not from the shadows. It's not from behind a veil. It's in the candlelit room where he comes to choose. The other girls tremble. You don't. You meet his gaze and smile. That smile, your greatest weapon, does something no one expects. It makes the sultan pause. He looks again. He picks you. In the harem, that should have been the end. A single night, maybe two, but you break every rule just by being yourself. He doesn't forget you. He calls you again and again and again. Soon, you're not just another concubine. You're his concubine, his favorite. And the harem starts whispering your name with a mix of envy and terror. You rise quickly, not just because of your wit or your beauty, but because of how you make Suleiman feel. You laugh with him. You challenge him. You don't just seduce, you engage. Behind closed doors, you tease him like a childhood friend. You recite Persian poetry to match his verses. You ask questions no one else dares. He tells you of his dreams, an empire that spans continents, an age of justice and beauty, where he will be remembered as Suleiman the Magnificent. And you plan how to make sure he remembers you too. One day, he writes you a poem, a real one. Not just passion scribbled in the heat of desire, but a verse declaring you his soulmate. And then something even more shocking. He stops visiting the other women. Just like that, the man who rules half the world now refuses to rotate concubines. It's unheard of. It breaks tradition. But no one dares question it, because his wars are going well, his people are thriving, and in his heart, you now live rent-free. But you know something others don't. Favor is fleeting. You've seen girls adored and discarded. You've seen laughter turn to silence. So you don't just bask in his love, you build on it. Every compliment is turned into opportunity. Every private moment is transformed into leverage. You don't just want his love. You want security, position, power. And for that, you need more than affection. You need children. When you give birth to a son, Mehmed, you cement your place in history. But it's not just joy. It's war. Because there's already a powerful woman in the palace, Mahidevran, the mother of Suleiman's eldest son, Mustafa. Mahidevran is furious. She's no soft mistress. She's known for her temper and her connections, and now there's a rival in her way, you. Tension crackles through the palace. The harem divides into factions. One side supports Mahidevran, the traditional consort. The other whispers that a new favorite may become something more. You're warned, threatened, even beaten. Mahidevran allegedly orders an attack that leaves bruises on your face. But you don't cower. You go straight to the Sultan. He sees the bruises, feels the betrayal, and Mahidevran is exiled to the old palace. You win. And that's when you stop playing defense. Now, you're not just the favorite. Now you plan to become the wife, and in doing so, you prepare to break one of the empire's most sacred traditions, one that no woman has dared challenge in 300 years. The doors of the harem may look like gates to a paradise, but behind them, every glance is a calculation. Every laugh is a tactic. Every servant is a spy. You've survived slavery, seduction, and a political ambush by a rival mother of princes. But now, you're in a different kind of game, the game of shadows. Welcome to the imperial harem. You can smell the rose oil burning in the lamps. You hear the rustle of silk as women pass in the corridors, their slippers whispering secrets to the polished tiles. Everything is clean, beautiful, sacred, but underneath that surface hums a constant current of ambition. This isn't just a place for pleasure. It's a school of power. And you're the top student. You already know how to make Suleiman laugh. That gives you his attention. But here, in this world of women, attention isn't power. Information is. So you start listening. You learn who the head eunuch favors. Who delivers letters to the Valid Sultan, the Sultan's mother, still wielding enormous power. You know which bath attendant is too loose-lipped, and which servant girls pretend to be deaf but miss nothing. You learn the rhythm of the palace like a musician memorizing a score. What time the Grand Vizier's messenger arrives, which guards eat where, what flowers go into the Valid's tea, and you notice something strange. While Mahidevran had power because of tradition and seniority, you're gaining power through proximity and curiosity. There's a network here. You can feel it. Not just gossip, but influence. Some of the older concubines serve as silent advisors. Former favorites pass notes to the outer courts. Slaves pass on whispers from the army to their mistresses. And suddenly, you're not just a pretty face with clever jokes. You're becoming a hub. A request here, a promise there. You begin trading favors. One girl wants her brother released from a debt prison. Another wants her cousin placed in the kitchen staff. You relay messages, solve minor problems, and build a following, not with threats, but with thoughtful rewards. Suleiman doesn't see it yet. To him, you're still his bright, witty Hürrem, the one who tells him stories from Ruthenia, who reads his poems with real delight. But soon, your voice will echo far beyond the bedroom. You give him more sons, Selim, Bayezid, Cihangir. Each one increases your stake in the future of the dynasty, and each child makes you more dangerous to those who came before you. Especially Mustafa. Mustafa, the firstborn prince, is beloved by many. He's strong, dignified, the image of a perfect Ottoman heir. But his mother, Mahidevran, is now in disgrace, and that means you have leverage. You start watching him, his tutors, his servants, his alliances. You don't act yet, but every detail is inked into your growing playbook. Meanwhile, back in the harem, you begin subtly shifting the culture. You encourage your followers to study politics, not just poetry. You suggest changes to the training of the concubines, more languages, more literacy, more court etiquette. You push for reforms in the palace kitchen to reduce waste and increase donations to the poor. Every little improvement comes with your signature, and every improvement makes the Sultan smile. You're rewriting what it means to be a consort, and it doesn't go unnoticed. Some whisper that you want to be more than the Sultan's favorite, that you want to wear the title of Haseki Sultan, the chief consort, a title that hasn't officially existed before. Others go further. They say you want to be his wife. But that's impossible. The Sultan doesn't marry. Ottoman rulers never marry their concubines. It's a rule carved into the empire's bones, designed to keep politics clean, to avoid favoritism, to prevent foreign alliances through royal marriages. Except now, the Sultan's heart is bending those rules. And the tent, the small, personal, luxurious tent you now live in within the harem, is starting to feel like a command post. You meet with ministers, you advise on trade routes, you comment on foreign ambassadors' gifts. The lines are blurring. You write letters, so many letters, some to governors, some to the women managing charitable foundations. But the most powerful ones go to Suleiman himself. They're not just love notes. They are sharp, clear reports, questions, warnings, even advice about matters of war. You remind him of things others forget. You gently nudge him toward appointments and dismissals. You use memory, charm, and timing like a musician uses tempo and pitch. And soon, Suleiman starts to listen. He consults you before campaigns. He reads your letters before bed. He trusts you, not just with secrets, but with decisions. And then, sometime around 1533, the unthinkable happens. Suleiman breaks centuries of custom and marries you. It's a quiet ceremony. No trumpet fanfare, no public declaration, but the walls of the harem shake with the news. The sultan has a wife, and it's you. Suddenly, you're not just Hürrem, the beloved. You're Hürrem Sultan, the queen in all but name. And with that title comes not just prestige, but dangerous responsibility. No one knows what comes next. The empire hasn't had a queen before. You're writing the rule book as you go. You begin to formalize your influence. You set up charitable foundations. You rebuild baths and sponsor mosques. You order the construction of soup kitchens for the poor and schools for girls. And back in the harem, the whispers grow louder. Some fear you, some admire you. Most watch you carefully. Because now, you're not the woman who won the Sultan's heart. You're the woman who has changed the throne itself. You sit beneath a gilded arch, ink staining your fingertips, the scent of frankincense curling through the air like smoke from a hidden fire. The tent walls shimmer with embroidered tulips. Outside, the empire stretches across 3 continents, but inside, it narrows to this moment. The moment you realize you have the Sultan's full attention. And full attention is a dangerous thing. You've been his favorite for years. You've borne him children. You've broken tradition and become his wife. But love is not enough. Not here. Not in the palace where every smile could mean poison and every compliment hides a dagger. You know the stories. Favorite concubines cast aside, sons strangled in velvet sacks, wives exiled, forgotten, and you're not here to be remembered as a ghost. So you do what no woman has dared before. You make yourself indispensable. You don't just sit beside Suleiman, you study him. You learn how he thinks, how he speaks to his viziers, how his tone shifts when discussing Europe, Persia, or Egypt. You memorize the language of statecraft the way others memorize love poems. While other women practice song, you practice politics. He shares battle plans with you, at first as a confidant, then as a counselor. You raise questions about timing, diplomacy, not as a challenge, but as a partner. You don't give orders, you offer insight. And then something subtle happens. He begins asking your opinion before meeting with the council. That's when you know, you're no longer just the Sultan's heart, you're becoming his second brain. The harem trembles at the change. Grand viziers eye you warily. The scribes in the chancery whisper about the woman whose pen now reaches the inner circles of empire. You know they'll try to discredit you. That's why you keep your hands clean. You never issue a decree. Never speak directly to foreign envoys. But they all know, if they want something done, they go through you. You use this power carefully. 3 times, ambassadors from Venice request an audience. 3 times, they leave disappointed. Not because the Sultan said no, but because you didn't say yes. And they know it. They start sending gifts, not just to the palace, but to you. Perfumes, silks, rare books, exotic birds. They flatter your intelligence, your beauty, your taste. They write in delicate Latin that they value the advice of the empress behind the curtain. You never respond directly, but you send a book back to the ambassador's wife, a small, thoughtful gift. And the next day, Venice grants better trade terms to Ottoman merchants. That's how you win, quietly. Meanwhile, inside the palace, Suleiman begins to change too. He wears robes embroidered with lilies, your favorite flower. He quotes lines from your letters in council meetings. He starts referring to you not just as Hürrem, but as my pillar. That scares people. They start asking, how much influence is too much? You hear it in the baths. She smiles too often. She laughs too freely. She's not born of noble blood. And behind every insult is the same question. What happens when a slave girl runs an empire? But you don't answer with words. You answer with sons. Your children are growing, bright, handsome, ambitious. You tutor them not just in Quran and archery, but in the art of court survival. You make sure they respect Suleiman, but also you. They are your blood, your legacy, and most importantly, your leverage. Because one day there will be only one sultan, and you plan to make sure it's one of your sons. But there's a problem. Mustafa still lives. He's strong, skilled, and beloved by the army. The Janissaries chant his name, the people adore him. And his mother, Mahidevran, though disgraced, still plots from afar. The empire expects him to succeed Suleiman, and that cannot happen. So you begin the slow, silent process of reshaping destiny. You don't attack Mustafa, not directly. You raise questions, suggest doubts, quietly remind Suleiman of the danger of powerful sons growing too independent. You point out how previous sultans were betrayed by their heirs. You evoke stories of caution, of loyalty, of family duty. And Suleiman listens. But he's torn. Mustafa is his firstborn, his pride, his warrior prince. Yet he sees your sons every day, laughing, reading, quoting poetry. He sees you, faithful, wise, ever at his side. The seed of doubt has been planted, and now everything becomes about survival. You double down on strategy. You expand your network of loyalists, eunuchs, scribes, tutors, merchants. You invest in public works. You fund a mosque, a school, a hospital. Not just for charity, but for image, for legacy, for position. The people start calling you not just the Sultan's wife, but the mother of the empire. And then something wild happens. Suleiman takes you with him on campaign. No woman has ever done that before. Your tent rises beside his on the edge of the battlefield. You write letters to Istanbul. You advise on military supplies. You visit wounded soldiers. Your presence stirs controversy, but it also boosts morale. The men say, if the Sultan brings her to war, maybe she's part of the victory. And you are, because from your tent, you're running more than just a household. You're running the palace. One note to the head eunuch changes a court appointment. One letter from you shifts a tax policy. The lines between tent and throne blur further. People used to joke that women belong in the kitchen. Now they whisper that you belong in command. You run your fingers over the fine silk of your veil as you step into the private chamber. Heart calm, gaze sharp. The guards bow low. The silence that follows is louder than any fanfare. Because today, you are no longer just the Sultan's companion. You are his wife. The court doesn't quite know how to process it. No Ottoman Sultan has married a concubine in centuries. It violates a foundational pillar of imperial policy. Keep the Sultan's consorts without formal ties, without dowries, without political leverage. Marriage meant alliance. Marriage meant loyalty to a particular faction. Marriage meant power transfer. But Suleiman has done it. He has married you, Roxelana, the Ruthenian slave girl. You are now Hürrem Sultan, legally and publicly. The harem is stunned. The whispers have turned into open gasps. The eunuchs talk about it in hushed Turkish. The concubines pretend to be uninterested, but pause when you walk by. Even the Valid Sultan, once so unshakable in her old-school wisdom, keeps her remarks vague and unreadable. The Ottomans built an empire by avoiding exactly this kind of entanglement. But now, you're rewriting the playbook. Marriage changes everything. It means your children are no longer just sons of the Sultan. They're sons of his legal wife. Inheritance, already a blood-drenched nightmare in this empire, becomes even more complicated and far more tilted in your favor. You sit in your chambers, letters on the floor, the ink still wet from last night's reports. You don't celebrate with music or wine. You celebrate with paperwork, because now you wield legitimacy. And legitimacy in the Ottoman world is dynamite. The Grand Vizier, Ibrahim Pasha, tries to contain it. He's been Suleiman's childhood friend, his right hand in matters of war and diplomacy. But he doesn't like your rise. Not because of your gender, but because you're smarter than him at a different kind of war. The soft war. The war of influence, words, moods, rumors. Ibrahim frowns at your marriage, but says nothing. You smile politely when you pass him, but you notice how his voice strains when speaking to you. How he calls you lady instead of sultan. That will come back later. But for now, you pivot. Now that you're a royal wife, your responsibilities extend beyond the harem. You need projects, presence, visibility. You begin building your charitable empire, not just to serve the poor, but to secure allegiances. Your first major commission is a mosque complex in Istanbul. It includes a school, a public fountain, a soup kitchen, and a women's hospital. You sign the order with a steady hand. It's not just architecture, it's a declaration. I am here. I belong. I give back. Women in the streets begin speaking your name, not with suspicion but with affection. She fed my son. She cured my mother's eyes. She sent blankets to our village. Your image evolves from Shadow Queen to protector of the people. And yet, even as you build, you remain vigilant. Every success invites scrutiny. The palace may smile, but it smiles with sharp teeth. Some say the Sultan is bewitched, that you've enchanted him, that your laughter has poisoned his judgment, that he would never have abandoned tradition for anyone but a sorceress. Others claim you're a foreign agent, sent by Poland or Venice or even the Persians to unravel the empire from within. They don't understand something fundamental. You don't want to unravel it. You want to reshape it. Meanwhile, your sons grow. You see their minds blossom. Selim is thoughtful but indulgent. Bayezid is quick to anger. Cihangir, the youngest, born with a twisted spine, is quiet, reflective, brilliant. You teach them chess and diplomacy, poetry, and self-control. But every lesson ends with the same unspoken truth. Only one of you will survive. It's not dramatic. It's the Ottoman way. When a new sultan rises, his brothers fall, executed to prevent civil war, a system of succession soaked in crimson, wrapped in silk. So you plan accordingly. You don't pit your sons against each other yet, but you ensure they all know who has the sultan's favor, and more importantly, who has yours. The harem transforms again. It's no longer just a domestic sphere. It's your court. You host scholars, artisans, and architects. You maintain communication with provincial governors. You receive letters from distant wives of Ottoman officials asking your intercession. They call you Our Lady of the Palace. One day, while reviewing a set of ceramic tiles for your bathhouse, a young eunuch whispers that foreign merchants are now including a Hürrem tax in their budgets, bribes paid to couriers who might pass word of their gifts to you. You don't laugh, but you file that fact away. Your name is currency now. You look across the Bosphorus from your window. Somewhere out there, a rebellion smolders in Egypt. Janissaries are restless in Anatolia. Venice sharpens its pens for another treaty. The world turns as always. But this time, it turns a little closer to your orbit. In public, Suleiman continues to shine. He is the lion of the Ottomans. But in private, he leans on you more. You begin to shape how he sees the world. You offer reflections that no vizier dares whisper. You point out things he misses, and he listens, not out of obedience, but out of trust. Because he knows you're not just a queen in name. You're the woman who reshaped his reign. And in the end, you're not rewriting the story of one sultan. You're rewriting the story of the Ottoman throne itself. The scent of sandalwood curls through the air as your hand hovers above parchment, your quill dripping with black ink. A letter not of love, but of intent is about to leave your chamber. Not to Suleiman this time, but to the governor of Damascus. And with it, another silent ripple moves outward into the empire. Because you, Hürrem Sultan, are no longer just speaking to the throne, you're speaking from it. You've realized something no woman before you dared, that the Sultan's heart is only the beginning. If you want to build something that outlives you, you must create channels of power beyond the palace walls. And so you begin to build an empire of letters. Ink becomes your voice across deserts and rivers. You don't give orders. You offer insights, blessings, suggestions cloaked in respect. And they listen, because they know those words come from the woman closest to the Sultan's ear. It starts small. A request to delay a tax hike in a war-weary village, a discreet inquiry into a suspicious governor's behavior, a carefully worded congratulations on the birth of a provincial official's son. But each letter is like a silk thread stitching you into the empire's fabric. Soon, replies arrive addressed not to the harem or the sultan's wife, but to Hürrem Sultan in her own right. You recruit your scribes carefully, literate, discreet, loyal. They pen your thoughts in perfect Ottoman Turkish, sometimes in Persian, occasionally in Polish or Latin. One scribe, Yusuf, knows 5 languages and remembers every official's children's names. He becomes your shadow secretary, trusted with the flow of your empire's invisible veins. But your influence doesn't stop with letters. No, that would be too slow. So you expand into intelligence. You begin to build a network of watchers, servants, wives, merchants, even traveling dervishes, who carry back whispers. Not spies in the usual sense, but informants loyal to your house, your vision. You pay them not in gold, but in favors. Protection for a relative, education for a son, an introduction to a more powerful patron. A merchant from Bursa tells you which janissaries grumble about their wages. A midwife from Edirne reports that the new governor beats his staff. A courtier's cousin writes that the Venetian envoy brought strange gifts and seemed too interested in the Topkapi kitchens. You never say, investigate. You never say, punish. You merely mention things to Suleiman in passing, over tea. Strange, isn't it? How the price of wheat has doubled in Aleppo, you murmur, and within days, action is taken. Your tent, once a symbol of luxury, is now a headquarters. The cushions, the incense, the soft laughter, all camouflage, because behind them lies a war room. You hold private meetings here, not official, never recorded, but decisive. Viziers knock on your door not to gossip, but to negotiate. A promise from Hürrem is safer than a signature from most ministers, and yet you maintain the illusion of domesticity. You host dinners for court women. You send pastries to the barracks on festival days. You write poetry with Suleiman. You laugh easily, touch gently, and keep your enemies off balance. Because they don't know where you strike from. They only know that when you strike, the room changes. One of your greatest weapons is timing. You know when to suggest an idea and when to hold it back, when to praise a decision and when to ask a better question. You never challenge Suleiman publicly, but he comes to anticipate your counsel. He waits for it. And when others oppose you, you don't confront them directly. You let the silence do the work. You whisper to someone else, someone who owes you a favor. By the time your opponent realizes what's happened, they're out of favor or out of office or simply out. Still, not all resistance can be handled with whispers. Ibrahim Pasha, the Grand Vizier, remains a problem. He's brilliant, popular, and dangerously close to Suleiman. Some even call him the true co-ruler. He sees through the charm, the laughter, the silk. He knows you're a player in a game few acknowledge. And he does not like it. You remain cordial, polite, respectful. But your scribes begin tracking his decisions. Your informants report which ambassadors visit him, which officials meet him in secret. You gather everything, waiting, not for revenge, but for the right moment. It comes. Whispers begin to spread that Ibrahim is growing too bold, that he signed documents using the title Sultan's brother, that he dares to make decisions without consulting Suleiman. You don't invent these rumors, but you don't silence them either. And then, one evening in 1536, Suleiman summons Ibrahim to dine with him. They eat, laugh, drink together. All seems well. But by dawn, Ibrahim Pasha is dead, strangled in the very palace where he ruled. You do not gloat. You do not smile. You simply send a letter of condolence to his widow and another to the new Grand Vizier, gently offering your support. Because now, there is no barrier between you and the machinery of empire. You're not the woman behind the curtain anymore. You are the curtain, and behind it, the world bends to your whispers. The palace wakes to a low hum, servants scurrying, eunuchs barking commands, guards shifting in tighter formation. But beneath all the routine buzz, there's something else, something colder, something sharper. Another boy has been born, another son of the Sultan, and in the Ottoman court, a newborn is both a blessing and a warning. Because here, in the glittering halls of Topkapi, princes don't grow up to be brothers. They grow up to be rivals. You know this better than anyone, Hürrem Sultan. You've held your sons, Mehmed Selim Bayezid Jahangir, in your arms, swaddled them in silk, sung to them in Ruthenian lullabies. And all the while you've whispered silent prayers. Let them live and outlive. But you've also watched Mustafa, the Sultan's eldest by Mahidevran, train, thrive, and rise. He's a perfect prince. He's tall, noble, adored by the army. And worst of all, he's untouchable, for now. You sit with your children in the inner garden, pretending it's just another day. But behind the embroidery hoops and book readings, your eyes flick from guard to gate. Because you know, you're not raising boys. You're raising targets. The Ottoman succession is a cruel thing. It's not about birthright, it's about survival. No law says the eldest inherits. Instead, the strongest survives, and the others, they die. Legally, ritually, in silence. Your oldest, Mehmed, is already showing promise. He reads faster than his tutors, practices swordplay longer than his guards. He's soft with his younger brothers, but sharp with his words. He's what the empire needs. But that's exactly the problem. He's what the empire needs, not what the empire wants. Because Mustafa already has the loyalty of the janissaries, the public, the bureaucrats, and his mother. Mahidevran hasn't disappeared. She waits, quietly feeding support into Mustafa's veins. She writes to judges, sips tea with scholars, sponsors poets who sing her son's praises. So you do the same, but more elegantly. You commission fountains in your sons' names. You send gifts to their tutors. You ensure each one has a miniature court of loyal attendants, guards, and scribes. You even have verses penned about their virtues and read aloud in city markets. Just enough for people to notice, not enough to provoke alarm. And you play the long game. One by one, you help place your sons in key provincial governorships. Ottoman princes are always sent to rule distant cities as practice for the throne. It's tradition, but each assignment is a move on your board. Mehmed to Manisa, Selim to Konya, Bayezid to Amasya. Not just towns, power centers, cities with influence, armies, money. Each posting increases their chance of survival and the chance to be the last one standing. Still, you never pit them openly against Mustafa. That would be suicide. Instead, you see doubt. You begin to whisper not about Mustafa's ambition, but about its danger. You remind Suleiman ever so gently of the stories of past betrayals. Brothers turned rebels, sons turned murderers. You quote Persian tales of empires destroyed by disloyal heirs. And always you say it softly, sweetly, never demanding, only wondering. Suleiman starts to ask more questions about Mustafa's guards, about his meetings, about his letters. You pretend to change the subject, but always loop back. Meanwhile, you increase the visibility of your charitable work. You fund orphanages in Bursa. You send rice caravans to Syria during droughts. You expand your mosque in Istanbul. Your name becomes synonymous with generosity, with peace, with maternal wisdom. People begin to say, let one of Hürrem's sons rule. They were raised by a woman of mercy. But you know mercy is just a mask for strategy. Your youngest son, Cihangir, is sickly. His spine curves sharply. He cannot ride, cannot fight. And yet, he's your heart, your poet, your watcher. You teach him not how to rule, but how to see. He writes daily, letters, journals, political observations. He hears what others miss, and he warns you when the palace mood shifts, when the viziers lean toward Mustafa, when the gossip winds stir. You kiss his forehead and whisper, not all warriors wear armor. One day, a servant stumbles into your chambers, face pale. News has arrived. Mehmed is dead. Sudden fever, they say. No suspicion, no investigation. Your world tilts. You scream in silence, fists tight against your veil. But outside, you're serene, collected. Mother of the empire, your enemies say you took it well. They don't see the 3 days you didn't eat, the night you sat in Mehmed's empty chambers, the quiet moment when you knelt beside Cihangir and simply said, it begins now. With Mehmed gone, the balance shifts. Mustafa grows stronger. The court leans toward him. The army cheers louder. Mahidevran regains confidence. But you grow more dangerous, because grief sharpens you, refines you. You're no longer just protecting your sons. You're avenging one. You look at Selim and Bayezid. One will inherit, one will fall. And if you don't act decisively, both will perish. So you prepare. You call in debts. You reward old allies. You start removing neutral voices from the court and replacing them with loyal ones. And in the background, you hear the gears of destiny grinding louder, because there can be only one heir. And if Mustafa rises, your sons will fall. The lamps flicker low as you sit in your tent, not the silken canopy of luxury that others imagine, but the war tent, the one no one sees. Maps are spread before you, not of battlefields, but of alliances, of threats, of names. Names that shift like sand depending on the day's wind, loyal, treacherous, uncertain. This is not just the Sultan's empire anymore. It's yours too. And this tent is where the real war is fought. There is no army under your command, no sword at your hip. But from here, you direct ministers, guide favors, approve appointments, and when needed, plant seeds of ruin. Because in the palace, power is perception, and perception can be sculpted. Your tent becomes a shadow cabinet. You meet not in official court, but at night under the pretense of poetry gatherings or strategy sessions. The Grand Vizier seeks advice on behalf of the Sultan. Governors write you directly. Ambassadors offer bribes masked as gifts, careful to couch them in flowery letters praising your piety. You never call it governing. That would invite death. You call it helping. But make no mistake, you are shaping policy. A pasha in Egypt who mistreats the poor? Reassigned. Quietly, permanently. A provincial judge showing too much sympathy for Mustafa's allies? Suspended pending investigation. A scholar who praises Mahidevran's lineage too publicly? finds himself mysteriously without patrons. You don't punish with swords, you punish with absence, with silence, with erasure. And everyone notices, even Suleiman. He doesn't resist it, he encourages it in his own way. He sends more letters, requests your thoughts on regional petitions. He asks you to review candidates for court positions. You read each document twice, once for content, once for implications. One night, over a bowl of dates and warm milk, he asks you, "Do you think Salim is ready for more responsibility?" You pause, then answer, "Yes." But Bayezid must be watched. He burns too quickly. It's a test. You pass. He nods. Nothing more. But from then on, he begins treating your opinions as policy recommendations. And so your tent becomes a government within a government. Your servants learn to operate like ministers. Your eunuchs develop faster communication channels between provinces. You begin hosting foreign wives of ambassadors, not in grandeur, but in influence. They carry your words back to their husbands, who carry them back to their courts. Venice, Poland, France, they all know the game now. To negotiate with the Sultan, they must first impress his queen, and you make them work for it. You ask them about their cities, their customs, their languages. You quiz them on reforms. You recommend books. By the time they leave your presence, they know this is no ornament, this is no concubine. This is the gatekeeper of the Sultan. Meanwhile, back in Istanbul, rumors swirl that you run the state from behind a curtain, that you've enchanted Suleiman with potions, that the harem has turned into a second divan, an alternate government. You don't deny it. You just keep delivering results. Trade improves, tax evasion drops, charity spending increases. The empire functions better under your invisible management than it did under any previous vizier. The court knows it, the streets know it, and that scares people, especially the old guard. Some ministers begin to push back. They argue against your son's appointments. They try to slow down your influence in foreign policy. One dares to suggest that Mahidevran's son, Mustafa, deserves a more direct path to the throne. You don't retaliate immediately. Instead, you write a poem. Yes, a poem. About a tree with many branches but only one root. You send it anonymously to the palace scribes. Within days, it circulates across Istanbul. The message is clear. One empire, one bloodline, one ruler, and everyone knows the branch you're referring to is yours. Your tent expands again, not in size, but in purpose. You begin training other women, trusted concubines, former slaves, women who've risen like you, hungry to matter. You teach them how to speak with subtlety, how to read council records, how to remember faces, and most importantly, how to listen. These women become your agents. One becomes a whisperer among the Valid Sultan's old allies. Another is placed in the kitchens, where messages pass with dishes. A third becomes a scribe's assistant, copying documents, occasionally copying two versions of them. You're not just ruling, you're institutionalizing female power. For centuries, the harem was seen as a silken prison, a decorative cage. You've turned it into a university of control. And Suleiman sees it all. One morning, as dawn breaks over the Bosphorus, he joins you in your garden. No guards, no ministers, just the two of you. He watches you feed a falcon, your newest pastime. "Do you think they would fear you less," he says, "if they could see you like this?" You smile, never looking away from the bird. "They fear me because I can be like this, calm, quiet, and still the falcon lands in my hand." He says nothing more because he knows the truth. Your tent is not a throne room. But it is where thrones are made, or unmade, and as long as you sit within it, no decision in this empire is truly made without you. You feel it before the words are spoken. It's in the air, tense, electric, uneasy, a scent like iron drifting through the corridors, a silence in the harem that's too heavy to be casual. Something has shifted in the rhythm of the empire. Then the words come, low and measured. Mustafa has returned to court. And just like that, the storm you've been waiting for walks through the gates. Prince Mustafa, Suleiman's eldest, the golden boy, the soldier's favorite, the empire's presumed heir. After years in provincial governorship, he's back, summoned by the Sultan himself. His presence casts a long shadow, even in the noonday sun. You hear it in the whispers of the guards, the flutter in the eunuch's footsteps, the way some women in the harem stand a little straighter when they mention his name. And you? You stay still. You've prepared for this moment your entire life. Mustafa is everything a court could want. Noble, poised, tactful, and surrounded by loyal men. especially the Janissaries. They chant his name under their breath. They smile wider when he passes. Some even whisper about an early succession. Why wait, they say. Let the lion rule before the old one grows weak. You don't panic. You watch. You note who greets him too quickly, who bows too low, which scribes deliver him extra copies of council notes, who suddenly visits Mahidevran's quarters again. But you also see weakness. Mustafa is strong but not subtle. He trusts too easily. He wears his virtue like armor, but armor has gaps. You don't need to pierce his chest. You only need to let others doubt his intentions. So you begin a new campaign, not with steel, but with silence and suggestion. You ask Suleiman how Mustafa's welcome was. You compliment the prince's dignity. You even suggest a gift. It's not what you say, it's what you don't say. You leave enough space in each conversation for uncertainty to fill the void. Suleiman begins to murmur questions of his own. Do the Janissaries love him more than me? Would he wait, or would he strike? You don't answer. You offer tea, and a pause long enough to make those questions echo. In the meantime, you tighten your circle. You recall Selim and Bayezid's most trusted advisors. You instruct their tutors to emphasize loyalty, obedience, restraint. You send them letters, not of alarm, but of preparation. Be ready, you write. Choose your allies carefully. Trust slowly. You cannot let them slip. Not now. Back in the capital, tensions rise. Political appointments suddenly stall. Messages take longer to arrive. Ministers begin whispering about contingency plans. The court starts breathing differently, shallower, more carefully. Everyone knows what this is. It's the beginning of a succession war. But officially, no one says it. So you act unofficially. You summon a poet, a man whose verses can cut deeper than any dagger. You ask him to compose a piece about a mighty tree with many branches and one disloyal limb. It circulates in coffeehouses within days. Then, days later, a letter appears from a provincial garrison. The Prince Mustafa cultivates armies, it reads, and speaks of destiny. The author is anonymous, and still your hands remain clean. It's not long before Suleiman receives an official report that Mustafa has been meeting alone with military commanders, that he's been discussing taxes, trade routes, even ceremonial rituals, things only a ruling sultan should touch. Is it true? It doesn't matter. Perception is policy. Suleiman begins withdrawing from Mustafa. Meetings are shorter, letters colder. Mustafa notices. One night, Suleiman stares at you longer than usual. He doesn't speak, just watches you. And you know what he's wondering. Is it true what they say, that she pulls every string? You don't flinch. You reach for your sewing needle, tie a thread, and begin stitching an old velvet hem. It's easier to tear, you say softly, but someone must be the one to mend. He says nothing. But the next day, a messenger gallops toward Konya, Mustafa's governorship, a summons. The prince is called to join Suleiman on campaign near Aleppo. Mustafa knows what this means. It's either a reconciliation or a trap, and so the prince does what every bold Ottoman heir would do. He accepts. He enters the sultan's camp in late summer. His men stay behind. He walks alone, unarmed, cloaked in silence. The tent is vast. Inside waits the sultan, waiting with judgment in his heart and hesitation in his hands. And then, nothing is heard until morning. The camp awakes to find Mustafa dead, strangled, by the sultan's own guards. A ritual execution, legal under Ottoman law, but seismic in impact. The empire holds its breath. The people mourn, the Janissaries rage, riots flicker in the east. But the court remains still, silent. Watching your face, you do not gloat. You mourn as a mother would. You speak softly of peace. You send a gift to Mahidevran, silver bracelets etched with the name of her son. But in your chambers, you exhale for the first time in years. The greatest obstacle is gone. Now, the future belongs to your sons. But peace is short-lived. With Mustafa dead, the rivalry between Selim and Bayezid boils over. The balance you so carefully kept now teeters. And you know, if you don't act now, you'll lose everything. So once more, you return to your maps, not of terrain, but of blood, and plan your next move. The empire mourns publicly, but you mourn strategically. Outside, the streets are thick with smoke from incense and burning letters. Poets dare not speak Mustafa's name. The Janissaries are restless but still. The Sultan has made his choice. But inside your chambers, inside the carved silence of your influence, a new war begins. And this time, it is not between princes. It is between sons. Selim and Bayezid, you knew it would come to this. You tried to delay it, encouraging letters, balanced favors, equal gifts of tutors and guards, but succession waits for no one, not even a mother. And with Mustafa gone, the illusion of unity shatters. Selim, the older, is slow to anger, indulgent in wine and comfort. Some say he lacks the fire of a warrior, but you know better. He is methodical. He listens before he strikes, like you. Bayezid, on the other hand, burns. Quick to action, quick to emotion. He commands love easily, but struggles to control it. His charisma draws crowds, yet he lacks restraint. Like his father, like the old Suleiman, you see the future in both of them, and the tragedy, because now the crown cannot be shared, and Ottoman law does not allow second-place survivors. You meet with Suleiman in the garden. No guards, no scrolls, only a pot of steaming jasmine tea between you. We must send them far, he says. You already knew he would say it. The princes will be reassigned, Selim to Kütahya in the west, Bayezid to Amasya in the north. Both are crucial provinces, with proximity to the capital and to each other. Too close, perhaps, but you nod, because you need time. Time to do what mothers in this empire are never allowed to do: choose. So you start watching more closely. Selim writes to you daily, formal, clear, deliberate. His letters are pragmatic, full of data: wheat harvests, troop discipline, taxes. He sounds like a scribe, a reliable one. Bayezid's letters, in contrast, are poetic storms, bursts of passion, tales of falcon hunts and heroic speeches. His advisors are popular, clever, and too ambitious for comfort. You begin testing their loyalty. To Selim, you send a false rumor about a rebellion in the east, cloaked as a report. He checks the sources, asks the right questions, and only moves after confirmation. Bayezid? You do the same. He rallies his troops before confirming it. By the time he finds it false, he's already offended 2 governors. Your decision becomes clearer. But Suleiman is not so easily convinced. He still grieves Mustafa, his strongest son, the one whose death he ordered with his own hand. You see it in his eyes, the doubt, the regret, the desire for peace. He thinks, maybe the boys can reconcile. You know better. So you plant a seed. You let it be known, through whispers, through careful leaks, that Bayezid has begun reaching out to old Mustafa loyalists, that he is hosting feasts with disgruntled commanders, that letters have been intercepted. All half true. All enough to draw Suleiman's suspicion. Then, Bayezid makes a fatal error. He refuses an order to move farther east. He claims it's unjust. He pens a scathing letter, accusing court officials of scheming against him. He never names you, but everyone knows who he means. That letter reaches Suleiman, and in that moment, you see your chance. You meet the Sultan alone. He has inherited fire, you say, but we have too much to lose to be ruled by flame. Suleiman doesn't respond. He only watches the sun lower over the domes of Istanbul. 2 weeks later, an imperial decree is issued. Bayezid is officially labeled a rebel. A bounty is placed. Selim is tasked with the Sultan's blessing to march against his brother. You don't sleep that night. You sit with Cihangir, your youngest, the gentle one with the twisted spine. He watches the moon with you in silence. He won't survive, you whisper. Cihangir nods. He knows, and you both cry. Not because your plan is working, but because it has to. In 1559, the 2 armies meet near Konya. The battle is brutal, not just in blood, but in meaning. Brother slays brother, loyalty shatters, and in the end, Bayezid flees east to Persia, defeated but alive. But not for long. 2 years later, under political pressure, the Shah of Persia hands Bayezid and his sons over to the Ottomans. They are executed. All of them. You receive the news quietly, you lock the doors, you dismiss your attendants, and you scream. A deep guttural cry, part agony, part guilt, part exhaustion, because you've won. But at what cost? Selim now stands as the uncontested heir, the court aligns, the janissaries bow, the people settle into the rhythm of order again. But you? You are changed. You carry the memory of 4 sons, one lost to fever, one to politics, one to battle, one to grief. Only Selim remains. And now your final task is not victory. It's legacy. You begin building again, not palaces, but foundations. Schools, mosques, orphanages, places where your name will live longer than your title, where women can learn, where the poor can be sheltered, where memory can be reshaped. Because history may call you ruthless, but you will make sure it also calls you necessary. The halls are quieter now. The game is over. No more letters written in haste. No more whispered alliances. No more rival mothers hiding sharp glances behind silk fans. You sit in your chamber, older now, heavier in presence and memory, and listen to the empire breathe. Selim, your last surviving son, is the declared heir. The court has accepted it. The army has accepted it. Even the people, those fickle masses who once chanted for Mustafa, have turned their eyes toward the future. A future you carved with blood and brilliance. And you? You are no longer the rising star. You are the sunset queen. Still radiant, but aware the day is fading. And yet you are not finished. Now that your son's survival is ensured, your mission shifts. No longer protector, now architect of eternity. You want more than just to have lived. You want your legacy to echo. So you begin to build again, this time with stone and soul. Your greatest project is the Haseki Sultan complex in Istanbul. It isn't just a mosque, it's a city within a city. It includes a hospital, a school, a soup kitchen, a library, and a public bath. The marble is bright, the tiles are turquoise and gold, and the architecture whispers both grandeur and mercy. Every block laid is an act of permanence. This is not for fashion. It's not for vanity. It's for memory. You commission architects to design fountains across Anatolia. Your name, Hürrem, is etched into inscriptions, always with verses about peace, about love, about the hand that feeds. You sponsor the translation of medical texts. You fund female education programs in cities that barely allow women to read. Your influence doesn't fade. It evolves, and people respond. Letters pour in from villages you've never visited. They thank you for a new road, a safer bridge, a clean water source. Some women name their daughters Hürrem. The name, once foreign, once whispered, now blooms across the empire like a spring flower that refuses to be forgotten. Meanwhile, Suleiman grows older. His beard grays, his pace slows, but his trust in you deepens. You are no longer just his consort. You are his companion. He spends long afternoons beside you, watching ships pass through the Bosphorus. You speak not of politics anymore, but of poems, of memories, of what might come after. He calls you my light, and for once, it's not just a metaphor, it's the truth. You hold hands in public now. No one dares to raise an eyebrow, because you are not just a woman. You are Hürrem Sultan, the woman who redefined what a consort could be. But still, history has its appetite. Your youngest son, Cihangir, who never sought power, who never lifted a sword, dies from grief. His twisted spine never killed him. His broken heart did. He never recovered from Bayezid's death. Neither did you. That loss, more than any, bruises you from the inside out. You retreat briefly, withdraw from court life, you walk the gardens alone, you stop writing for a time. But the empire doesn't stop, and neither does the need for you, so you rise again. Quietly, slowly, you begin work on your own mausoleum at the Suleymaniye Mosque complex, the great jewel of Suleiman's architectural vision. But this time, a tomb is not an end. It's an anchor, a way to say, I was here, I mattered, and I changed this world. You also make one final political move. You reconcile with Mahidevran, not with hugs or warm words, but with a gesture. You arrange for her to be cared for in Bursa with dignity. You ensure she receives stipends, guards, and a modest court, because power doesn't need to humiliate. It needs to endure. And it does. When you speak, people still listen, but they also speak of you now in reverence, not fear. They say, she was wise, she was fierce, she made the empire better. In one of your last letters to Selim, you write, lead not only as a sultan, but as a son. Never forget who bled for your throne. He keeps it in his library for years. In time, even foreign dignitaries acknowledge your impact. Venetian ambassadors who once whispered about your influence now write reports marveling at the hospitals and schools you founded. French envoys name you the red jewel of the East. But titles mean little now. You've already won the greatest title of all, mother of a dynasty. You rest more, you eat less, you speak in softer tones, but your mind remains sharp. You remember every ally, every betrayal, every moment that led you here, from a wooden cart dragging you into slavery to the highest tower of the Ottoman court. And when you sleep, you dream not of war or strategy. You dream of Cihangir's laughter, of Selim's first steps, of Mehmed's books, Bayezid's fire, Mustafa's silence, and in the quiet of your tent, the real one, now a chamber wrapped in shadow, you smile. Not because you are finished, but because you survived long enough to see the empire bend in your direction, and soon to rest where it all began, at the heart of Suleiman's vision and at the center of your own. The wind carries salt from the Bosphorus into the high windows of the Topkapi Palace. You taste it as you breathe, familiar, sharp, cleansing. You sit wrapped in a silk shawl, watching the seagulls wheel above the domes. There's no letter to write today, no envoy to charm, no son to save. For the first time in decades, the empire doesn't need your hands guiding it, but it still moves to your rhythm. Suleiman comes to you more often now. The weight of age settles on his shoulders, though he still stands like a lion. He brings books now instead of state secrets, reads to you from Persian epics, laughing gently as your head leans against his shoulder. And yet, beneath it all, the past stirs. You've ruled a palace of memories. You can't help but remember. The first time you arrived, trembling, chained, anonymous. The first night he called you Hürrem. The moment you realized you could whisper, and the empire would listen. Not all memories are soft. You remember Mehmed's fever, Cihangir's quiet pain, Bayezid's fire, Mustafa's death. The crown of motherhood is gilded with loss. But you also remember your triumphs, not the ones the court sang about, but the silent ones. A girl given books for the first time. A scribe raised to chief advisor because you saw his worth. A governor removed because he abused his power. A mother who held her child with dignity again because of your laws. This, you realize, is power. Not the coronations, not the diamonds, but the small mercies only influence can offer. Still, you know your time is ending. Your health weakens. Some days your hands shake when you try to hold your cup. Your eyes blur when reading. You feel the quiet unraveling, and so you prepare. You meet with Selim. No guards, just you and your son. You look at him, not as a prince, not as a sultan in waiting, but as your child. You've inherited a throne, you say, but remember, I gave you the right to it. He doesn't speak, just nods. You can tell he wants to say more. He doesn't have to. You meet with Suleiman one last time in your private garden. He brings you pomegranates. You laugh. You remember, you say. Always, he replies. The silence between you is full of grief, of joy, of everything you built together. You made this world, he says. I ruled it, but you made it. You take his hand, and for a moment you are just lovers again. Not the lawgiver, not the queen, just two people who changed the shape of history. And then comes the night. It's quiet. A breeze moves through the curtains. The call to prayer hums faintly in the distance. You lie in bed, eyes closed, breathing slow. Your attendants stand by, waiting, watching. You do not stir because you are gone. But not really. The empire still carries your name. It's carved into mosques, spoken in foreign courts, whispered by mothers teaching daughters. They can be more than fate says they are. And when Suleiman finally follows you to the tomb, he is buried beside you. No Ottoman consort before you had that honor. You weren't just a consort. You were Hürrem Sultan, the woman who changed everything from within a tent. And now, even in death, you lie at the heart of an empire you helped shape. Not as a shadow, but as a founder. There's a shift in the empire's breath the day your tomb is completed. The domes rise beside Suleiman's Grand Suleymaniye Mosque, like twin hearts still beating long after their owners have stilled. Carved tiles shimmer in blue and gold. A verse from the Quran winds its way above your resting place, not just a prayer, but a promise. You are not forgotten. In fact, you've become more present in death than ever in life. Across Istanbul, your name echoes in new places, on the tongues of scholars, artists, builders. The Haseki Hürrem Sultan bathhouse fills daily with women who speak of you as though you still walk among them. The soup kitchens you built never close, even in the harshest winters. A little girl in Anatolia learns to write her name because your endowments funded her school. This is what victory looks like, not crowns and ceremonies, but continuity. Selim now rules as Sultan. They call him Selim the Sought, drunk on wine, easy with indulgence, but you taught him enough to last. You embedded your principles, your alliances, your strategy into the very bones of the court. Even his most careless moves are cushioned by systems you helped create. He writes to your former advisors with respect. He signs edicts to expand your institutions. He visits your tomb in the early mornings when the world is too tired for politics. Sometimes he brings your grandchildren with him, the daughters you never had in flesh, but left behind in spirit. Through Selim's reign, you remain not in shadow, but in structure. The Sultanate of Women, a term that future historians will use, doesn't begin after you. It begins with you, because you prove that power doesn't need a sword or a crown. It needs persistence. Still, not all look kindly on your legacy. Some chroniclers, mostly men with ink-stained fingers and bruised egos, write of you as manipulative, a witch, a temptress, the woman who brought chaos to the orderly structure of state. They say you broke tradition. They say you turned the sultan from warrior to poet, from judge to lover. And in a way, they're right. You did change him, but not with poison or dark magic. You changed him with vision, with presence, with strategy that no one expected from a girl stolen from a village. What they call chaos was simply a new order. Your order. You don't need to defend yourself. Because history remembers differently than chroniclers. It remembers what lasts. And your name is on every stone that still stands centuries later. Even beyond the Ottoman world, queens and empresses begin to be seen differently. In Persia, in Russia, even in France, rulers look east and whisper of the woman who advised the greatest sultan of her age, the woman who ruled from a tent and turned it into a throne room. And though your body is gone, your words still move. The poetry you left behind is copied by girls learning to read. Your lines about love, about loss, about empire, these aren't just verses, they're evidence. Proof that power can be tender, that politics can hold poetry. In your absence, women begin to dream more dangerously. Concubines ask for more time in the libraries. Mothers speak to their sons with more confidence. Even the eunuchs, your oldest allies, continue your legacy in quiet ways, protecting the channels you carved through court, ensuring that female voices still carry through the marble corridors of the palace. And the empire, for all its contradictions, survives. Not perfectly, not peacefully, but with a foundation you poured with your own hands. Years later, when tourists stand before your tomb, they'll read your name and wonder how a concubine buried beside a sultan could have left such an imprint. They won't see the tears, the blood, the sleepless nights, the boys buried before their time, the victories that cost you part of your soul. But that's all right, because you didn't build your legacy for them. You built it for the women who come after, the ones still trapped, still dismissed, still underestimated. And when they learn your story, not the legend, but the truth, they'll walk taller, speak louder, demand more, because you showed them it's possible. You showed them that a girl from nowhere could rise to everywhere. You showed them that the heart of an empire could beat from within a tent and keep beating, even after it stopped. Rain taps softly against the stone walkway leading to your tomb. Istanbul breathes in gray clouds and candle smoke. The call to prayer echoes faintly, as it did every day of your life in the harem, the palace, and the throne behind the throne. But now your legacy is louder than any muezzin's call. Even in silence, you speak. Selim's rule continues, and while he lacks your fire, he benefits from your design. The empire holds, even when he stumbles. Your foundations, both literal and strategic, keep it from collapsing. You taught him how to survive, not perfectly, but just enough. Others rise in your wake. Nurbanu Sultan, your future daughter-in-law, watches you with careful eyes, even now, through memory. She learns from your playbook, builds upon it. The next generation of royal women is not just content to embroider handkerchiefs. They learn to read political texts, build alliances, navigate court whispers. You didn't just claim power. You normalized it. Now, it's not strange when a sultana advises the grand vizier. It's not scandalous when she funds a mosque or appoints her own clerics. You taught the empire to expect influence from women, then made it impossible to remove. In courts across the Islamic world, your name is spoken with a blend of reverence and caution. She changed him, some still say about Suleiman. Yes, you did. You took a man forged in conquest and showed him another kind of empire, the one made with diplomacy, art, patience, and strategy. Under your gaze, he built a legal code that outlasted wars, commissioned poetry that outlasted bloodlines. Together, you carved a different kind of Ottoman identity, one that blended fire and silk, blade and pen. But you were never merely a mirror to Suleiman's greatness. You were the light source. The letters you exchanged still survive. Some are plain, lists of appointments, responses to petitions, but others sparkle with intimacy, with understanding, with respect. They show a partnership, not possession, and in that you shattered centuries of expectation. Still, not all who live in the empire celebrate your memory. In some corners, men argue that your influence set a dangerous precedent. that the sultanate of women makes the empire soft, feminine, unstable. But history disagrees. Because when men fell to infighting, women held the court together. When sons quarreled, it was mothers who negotiated. When sultans fell into indulgence, it was consorts who made policy in the background. You were the first to wield that kind of invisible power. The others simply followed your lead. There are whispers, too, of whether you were ever truly happy. Did you sleep well, knowing sons died so others could rule? Did you ever regret turning on Mustafa? Did power ever feel hollow? The answer is not simple. You cried more than people will know. You lost more than they'll ever write down. But you also saved more than they'll ever admit. You were not a heroine, nor a villain. You were real. And real women leave legacies that don't fit neatly into stories. You feel the pull of posterity now. In the way historians try to box you into categories: schemer, savior, seductress, stateswoman, as if you couldn't be all of them at once. But the tiles of your mosque still shine, the orphans still eat, the libraries still carry your seal, the empire still echoes your voice. That is your answer. You did not live to be understood. You lived to endure. And long after the thrones fall, the bloodlines thin, and the palaces crumble, you will remain in marble, in the boldness of women who dare to reach beyond the limits drawn for them. Because once you did, and you showed them how. Word count, waiting for, continue?